Firstly, before I begin, I want to do a quick apology that I'm actually currently in my co-working space. So it's not my normal setup, not as nice of a camera or lighting or microphone. And so I'll be doing a lot of this. Please rest assured that I wish I could look you right in the eye, but unfortunately I cannot. So let's begin with this. Who am I? My name's Anna McDougall. I'm a software engineer with Novatec Consulting, and I gave this presentation for the first time last year at the JavaScript Congress, where Ramona was also presenting. And as a result, she said, why don't you present it again? I was initially not excited about presenting it because I was worried that everyone would be super testing experts and I would be coming in with this very beginner level presentation. I myself consider myself a real beginner in Cypress. So I apologize that a lack of deep technical knowledge, but my goal with this presentation is hopefully to just get you started with it. So if you've ever kind of wondered, how can I get started with front-end testing? What am I even testing for? What am I doing? How do I start? What is Cypress? Why should I care? These are the kind of questions that I'll hopefully be able to answer for you. And also just show you some kind of cool stuff. And of course, we will watch tests go brrrr. So that is the most important part. So let's get started. I'm going to first talk a little bit about what end-to-end testing is, when we should use it, when we maybe shouldn't, why Cypress is the current tool of choice, in my opinion. Then we'll go look at installation. I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to structure our tests, and then we'll do the fun part where we do some coding and we put together a really cool little Mad Libs application, of course, and then we'll see what our Mad Libs produces at the end. So, of course, any Mad Libs application, for those who don't know what Mad Libs is basically a story where you leave blanks and then you fill in those blanks with an adjective, a noun, a person's name, whatever, and then you don't know how that's going to come together in the end. And then at the end, you kind of put each one into its place and hopefully you come up with a really weird story that doesn't make much sense usually. So that's the goal. And of course, what I want from you is that you, by the way, you can see my screen, right? I'm not like, okay, great. I should have checked that before. Thank you. That you please go to this address. There's also a QR code in the corner. And I've got 10 fields and you can fill them in with objects, animals, food, drink, names, cities. There's a list there of different things you can fill in. Go wild. Feel free to put in the weirdest, most wonderful thing you can think of. And then at the end, we'll put it all into our app and see what comes out at the end. Great, so let's get started. Oh yes, I just told you about that, so that's fine. You can do it many, many ways. There's a link. You can go to menti.com and enter that code, or there'll be a QR code. If you have missed this and you haven't quite got it, the QR code will come back later in the presentation as well. And I think someone else has a link that can pop it into chat if you haven't seen it. Great, so what is end-to-end testing? It's a big question. Obviously, I'm not going to, you could have like 2 or 3 talks just on this one topic, so I'm not going to go into too much depth there. But the basic idea is that end-to-end testing is expensive. End-to-end testing takes time, it takes energy, and it also takes up memory, and it takes up time and memory and time, especially time, don't know if I mentioned that, in pipelines. So it's the kind of thing that you have to really decide that it's worth it for you and your application. The good thing is it's super cool. So the great thing is that it might be a bit expensive to set up and expensive to run, but at the end of the day, you can really get an idea of if your application is working correctly and catch some bugs and just make sure that you are following everything through. So what is end-to-end testing? I love this picture because it's this idea of walking along this big path, and that's kind of the idea I want to convey here, which is that when a user is in your application, you have what are called user paths. You should kind of know when you're creating any front end at all, any sort of website, you kind of know what you want your user to be doing. and what you expect them to be wanting to achieve. So the idea is to be thinking about this path. What path will my user take? And then what you want to do is to be able to test that from the moment they enter to the moment they leave, that everything is working smoothly. They're seeing what they're supposed to see, and they're being able to do what you expect them to be able to do, given your goals for the website or the UI that you have in place. In general, I mean, I say it's purely, it's hard to say, but in general, it is about user experience. So what we're usually not testing is, for example, does this particular function in my code work? So I have this function that the classic one adds two numbers. Does that function work? Well, you're probably not actually going to test that. What you would test is when my user puts in the loan to income ratio that they want, will the graph show the correct result? Something along those lines. So inside of that, of course, there are lots of different units and lots of different functions and things that are running behind the scenes, but that's not what we're worried about here. What we're worried about here is, what is the user experiencing, and is it what they expect, basically what we expect. So why would we use Cypress to do this? What is Cypress? This is a little preview of the screen we're going to see later. I think, can you see my mouse, by the way? Yes, cool. So here you can kind of see a few things that are going on here. This here is the preview window, and that's going to show us what our application actually looks like. So in this case, it's a to-do app that they're testing. And over here, you can see a list of the tests that we're running. So for example, should allow me to add a to-do item is a test that is being run. And then you can kind of see the steps that are happening here. So you get the preview screen, so you can see it happening in front of you. And that's why this talk is called Watch Tests Go Brrrrrr, because you're not just reading a little console output, you can actually sit there and look at it. You can see it happening in front of you. And then over here, you can see what the actual tests are to make sure that your user paths are being completed successfully, essentially. So there are some cool things that I like about Cypress. The first is called time travel. What is time travel? Well, unfortunately, it's not what you would expect, because that would be super cool. But it does mean that what you can do, and I'll show you this feature later, is, let's say here you're going to enter some text into this field. If something goes wrong, you can actually go back in time. You can hover over or click into any state that you were at any point during the test and see what happened at that point. So if something's going wrong in your tests, it allows you to actually see in front of you visually what has happened, which is very nice. The other thing is automatic weighting. If you have done any sort of unit testing, for example, with Jest, you know that often you have to manually tell your tests to wait for something to happen that takes time. You don't have to do that in Cypress mostly. It will actually do a lot of that for you, which is very nice. The other thing is cross-browser testing. You can easily switch between Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or whatever you want to test in. So let's talk quickly about installation. I'm not actually going to show you the installation because it's super simple, and I've obviously set everything up ahead of time. But it's very easy. You just go into your project, into your base folder, you type npm install save dev Cypress. What that does is it installs Cypress, it creates a Cypress folder, and it also gives you a load of example tests that you can play with and look at. Personally, being someone who just likes to experiment myself, I just delete them all and then I start from scratch. But if you are someone who learns from reading code more, then that could be something that you really enjoy looking through. And then npx Cypress open actually opens the Cypress graphic user interface that we saw there, and allows you to see those tests as they run, which is very nice. So let's talk about structuring tests. This is actually a section that I added to this after I got feedback from Ramona that she found it really useful to learn more about how you can put tests together. So I thought I'd offer you two different structures that I've come across for actually writing individual tests. So because obviously on a front end or any application, there are so many things your user can do, right? So how do you actually decide what to test? How do you actually what goes in a test? What is it made up of? What are the elements in the recipe? And there's the QR code I promised you. So this is the one that I've seen mostly actually in backend testing, but it can also be applied. You'll see how similar it is to the structure that I use. It's the given, when, then scenario. So you say, given this state in my application, so given a login screen, when, and then you say what actually happens when I enter my username and password, then, and that's where you put in your expectation. What do you want to make sure is happening? Then it should log me in when I press the button or whatever it is. So given a login screen, when I enter a correct username and password and click the button, then I should see my next screen. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And you'll see it's very similar to how I like to structure my tests, which is exactly the same idea, just with different words. So there's no right or wrong, it's just whatever works for you. Is arrange, act, and assert. So for me, arrange is saying, what environment do we need for this test to run? How do I put the pieces together to start the situation in which this test can be executed appropriately? Act, what is the user likely to do, or what do we want to actually test? We want to test an interaction of some sort, right? We're not just testing that a site exists. We want to actually see when someone interacts with it, what happens next. And assert, what should a user see or experience in this scenario? So arrange, for example, as you'll see in a bit, is making sure that we've got our login screen loaded and ready. Act is the actual entering of the username and password and the clicking of the button. And assert is checking that we've moved to the next screen that we expect them to go to. So it's the same idea as given, when, then, but it's just kind of framed a little bit differently. So you can choose whichever one you prefer. Personally, I like arrange, act, assert. So that's what I'm going to be using today. So if you don't like it, tough luck, I guess. All right, so let's write some tests. I just love Emily's reactions. They're just helping me a lot. Thanks, Emily. So let's write some tests. Okay, here we go. And I've got my screen somewhere here. Okay, so here we can see a little example of a test that we're going to write. And this is going to be exactly what I just described. It's going to be a login screen. And you can see here, oh, actually, I don't think that needs to be there anymore. So we can just delete that. Describe. So what is describe? Well, firstly, sorry, I should go back a few steps. You just see here that we're inside our Cypress folder, just so I can give you a bit of orientation for where we are here. And then we're in integration, and I have created a folder called 0 Madlibs login. And here I'm describing the test that I'm going to do. And so these tests can be described as my Mad Libs login tests. Again, naming for Ramona doesn't have to be complex or creative, just describe what the tests are doing. And then we begin with a before each. Now, what is a before each? If you've never done testing, maybe you're not familiar with this idea. Before each is basically making sure that every time a new test runs, a certain state is being achieved. In my login function that I just deleted from my imports, I'm actually saving the login state, so is logged in or is true or false. And so here what I'm doing is trying to clear it. I'm saying stop, don't store that it's logged in, let's just start over. It could also be session storage, and then you could set it to false or something. So it would also be fine, whichever way you want to do it. So this is all it is. It's just going to say, if we had, for example, 10 tests, this would run 10 times. So that's the idea, just to have something that kind of resets it. So you're always working with a blank slate. That's one of the goals here, is to kind of isolate the tests a little bit. So then we've got it. So the describe here is describing kind of a block of tests that are nicely grouped together. The it is the individual test that you want to use. And the nice thing about the it is that it kind of flows naturally in the English language. So here you can say it logs in successfully. and it is the, I don't know, the ether, I guess, or the user in this case. So it logs in successfully. So let's begin with arrange. You can see here, exactly as described before, what we're going to expect to happen. Our arranging is going to set up our username and password and go to the home page. Our act is going to type in the username and password and click a button. And then our assert is going to check that the header that comes on the next page is there and that there's a table with 10 input fields, because that's where our user is going to enter their objects, names, cities, foods, drinks, all that kind of stuff. So let's begin with the arrange. We're going to start very simply. I remember when I did this presentation at the JavaScript Congress, I think I forgot to use quote marks for my constants, and I didn't know why it wasn't working. That's just classic presentation moment. So here we go. You can see very simple, just classic JavaScript. And then we're going to go to the home page. So here we've got Sci. Now, Sci is the shortened version of Cypress, and you will see that almost all Cypress commands begin with Sci. So Sci. And here we're going to do visit. And this is going to take us, oh, again, need speech marks, McDougall, going to take us to our local front end. Okay, let's keep it really simple. Okay, so before we go any further, let's just have a look at what this first step looks like in Cypress. You can see here I've already prepped the little command, so we can do this. We'll do Cypress open. And then when it comes up, I can move it to the right screen so you can see. Here we are. And you can see here we've got our two folders, and inside this Mad Libs completion is the Mad Libs app spec. You can also see that it's got .spec, and that .spec is just telling Cypress this is a test. I think the other one you can use is just .test. .js, also fine. It's really just up to you. And you can see here also what browser I'm choosing. I've chose Chrome, and then we can just click it. I think, actually, we'll do it this way. We'll just click run, and it will also load in the wrong screen. Here we are. Aha, now we see Cypress. Welcome to Cypress. Okay, and you can see here, log in successfully. And the only thing it's doing is visiting this. And you can see my extremely professional login page. So I can't believe the background doesn't even go all the way down. That's how much effort I put into it. So here you can see the login page, my great exit site. I honestly don't even know where that goes. Maybe we should test that at the end. And you can see here as well, you can see the future tests that we're going to write. Now, something really important is that in our structure, we talked about arrange, act, and assert. Now, assert is really where the real testing is happening. That's where we're saying what we expect, and those are what will fail if something goes wrong. So what does that mean? If we don't have an assert body and we're not actually asserting anything, the default of Cypress and of pretty much every testing library is to say that it has passed. So this can be a little bit deceptive. For example, if you haven't written your tests correctly or you haven't asserted the right thing, then your test could pass and you think, oh, great, everything works. But it might actually be that you've just written your test wrong. So it's really important to notice here that all of these are saying they pass, but no commands were issued in this test. So we can't get too complacent. It's really important when you're writing tests to test that tests will fail from time to time by purposefully putting in the wrong information and just checking, okay, does this test fail? Great, that's good. Now I can turn it back into what I want. So that's just more like I guess, a little philosophical question to think about to make sure that you are also testing the right things and not to get fooled by the green tick. But the good news here is that everything is working, our application is running, and our visiting of this address is also working. So we've got that. We can remove my pseudocode, and then we want to act. So the first thing we're going to do is use what's called get. Now, get is a command that uses, if I'm remembering correctly, it uses CSS queries a la jQuery to actually get elements out of your DOM. So here, for example, we're going to get an input field with the name username. So if you are familiar with jQuery or you're really good with CSS selectors, you'll already be familiar with this kind of format. If not, that's like a separate skill that is worth building, especially if you want to do this in your own application. So we've got that there. So now we've kind of grabbed this field out, but we haven't done anything with it yet. So of course, what we need to do is to enter the username. And again, Cypress keeps things really simple by keeping it just as .type. So again, we are picturing ourselves as the user. We get the field and then we type into it the username. Now, of course, you could just type Anna McDougall as a string. Either way is fine. But personally, because I like having this arrange, act, assert structure, this keeps things clearer to me and makes things easier to change later if need be. And so similarly, we're going to do the same thing here for the password. There we go. It's like you know how to type and then someone's watching you type and suddenly you don't know how to type. Okay, and here we're going to get the button. Any guesses what we type next to click the button? Yes, you all guessed correctly. Click. Congratulations, you're a very good tester. All right, so now we can see that. Again, we haven't actually asserted anything yet. We haven't tested anything yet. We're just getting things, we're arranging, we're setting the scene, and we're doing what the user does, but we haven't actually checked yet what's coming back. So again, let's just switch back quickly to Cypress and see what this looks like. I'm going to watch a test go brrrr. If I can get the right window. There we go. All right, so you can see here we're now seeing a different screen. Every time you save, Cypress will automatically rerun the tests while it's open. So we kind of missed the tests go brrrr, but we're going to refresh and then we'll watch it. So you can see here, oh, that's fast, right? Yeah, it's fun. So you can see here, again, I mentioned time travel earlier. You can see here what's happened. They've selected input. There it is. And we've typed it. Yeah, and there it is, typed. And then we get the password field. We type it. It's hidden, but we know what it says. And then we get the button and then we can see it's been selected there and then it's clicked. And then we can see the post that's happened behind the scenes. So far, so good. And we know what happens afterwards because we can see it there. And here we're going to make sure that that's actually what happens every time. Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do, we're checking it's an H2. So the first thing we can do now, as with any CSS selection, for anyone who's worked with CSS before, you know that the selectors can be so specific or not specific. With Cypress, if you're not specific enough, you will get multiple elements back. So if we had more than one H2 on this page, we would get multiple elements here and our tests wouldn't work. So in this case, I'm just using H2 for simplicity, but in general, you want to be, you're better off being more specific than less specific. So here we've got get H2, and you can see Cypress is already recommending to me the function should, or the method should. So let's take that because that's what we use to actually assert something. We're saying this is something that should happen. Yeah, we want this to happen. And what are we going to check? We're going to check that it's going to contain text. So you can see here it's telling us this is a chainer. There are so many different things you can assert here. We're obviously not going to cover them all today, but contain text is a pretty simple one. And then here, we're going to say what the text should be. Here it even comes up, IntelliJ is very helpfully telling me that value is what we're going to check, and it's going to be enter your choices. Now, let's make our test fail. Okay, there we go. That should fail now, and we can have a look and make sure that we're actually testing. And I chose the wrong one again. Here we go. Oh, yes. And here we go. So we have beautiful red screen, but we want a red screen in this case because we want to make sure that everything's working because it's enter your choices exclamation mark, and we've entered into your choices ... And this is very helpfully telling us expected H2 to contain enter your choices, but the text was enter your choices. So we know that it's wrong and we know why, which is very helpful. So now we can go back and edit it and make sure that it's correct, like that. And then we're also going to check that a table contains 10 input fields. So first we need to, you guessed it, get our table. And then should. We have a few options here. Firstly, we want to check that the table is there. There's be visible is one option. You also have exist, which I think is personally one of my favorites. So let's do both. We can do exist. Let's see if I can remember how this works. And be visible. Ooh, and we can test more than one thing in one go. It's amazing. And then we want to look inside that, right? Because we don't want to have to get over again table input field 1, table input field 2, table input field 3, whatever. We want to try to minimize how much we're doing that. So here we're going to use this within function. This is just checking inside this as using this as a parent element, what child elements are there. And then again, we can do side.get input. Now, I mentioned earlier that if there were multiple H2s on the page, that we would get multiple results, and should contain text might not work because they might not all contain the same text, and it would be very confusing. Well, here we do have multiple input fields, but we know that, and that's fine with us. So what we get back is actually a collection, or I think if I remember correctly, it's called an HTML collection, I think that's the proper terminology, of 10 input fields. It's basically an array. If that freaks you out, it's just an array. It's just an array of input fields. And so what we want to check is there are 10 of them, right? So we'll use should again, but here we'll use have length. And then we just put 10. Okay. And that's basically all we want to check with this. We want to check that when we log in, we see the choices page with 10 input fields. So let's go and make sure that that's working. Oh, it's refreshing. Great. It's happy. You can see here, expected table to exist in the DOM, expected table to be visible, and then inside that, we expected 10 input fields. You can even see here, I'm hovering over input and it tells us 10 matched elements. So we can see exactly what elements we're looking at, and then we can see what they all are. Now, one other cool thing that I didn't show you before, if you're really struggling with selectors, with CSS selectors, you actually don't even really need to learn them, if I'm being totally honest, because Cypress enables you to be really lazy, which is great, which is this selector button here. You can just highlight one and you can just click it, and it will even tell you here, oh, look, that's got the ID animal. So, and then you can even use this copy like that, and you can just paste your side.get into here like that. Should, and again, we can do be visible, let's say. Yeah, something along those lines. So you don't even have to really learn CSS selectors. I mean, it's nice and it's good, and you probably should if you're a front-end developer, but if you don't want to, you can also get away with being lazy. So that is our first test. Yay! And we watched something go brrrr, which is great. It's a start. The question here is, should we write more tests for failing logins? And I wanted to touch on this briefly because there are a lot of different beliefs in terms of whether you should be, for example, testing every login scenario in one block. So in this file, for example, I've called it madlibs login tests. So should we then have every possible login scenario in this file? That's one way to do it. The other way you can do it, as I said, is to test a full user path. So maybe you decide to test, maybe you could call this file madlibs happy path or something, madlibs happy path, all values are valid or something. And then you actually have 10 tests or 3 tests, whatever it is, to take you through the login, and then through entering your choices, and then through seeing the results, or something along those lines, and then maybe logging out or something like that. So you can also do it that way. There's not really a right or wrong way. Personally, I prefer the user path method, but the problem with that is that sometimes you end up facing a lot of repetition, especially if you're testing many error paths. But my understanding is that the majority of the time, as I said, Cypress tests are expensive to run. So a lot of the time people will actually just choose 2 or 3 core functions that they want their users to be able to do, and then they'll just run those tests. So for example, on Twitter, you might log in, scroll through your feed, reply to someone, then log out. Or you might log in, post a tweet, I don't know, check your messages and log out or something like that. They might just check a few core paths that they want to make sure never, ever break. Because if you tested absolutely every single thing a user could do in Twitter with Cypress, your pipelines would just run for hours and hours and hours. So there are also ways in which you can be selective and different ways you can structure your front-end tests. So I think I'm probably going to go a little over time, but that's okay because we're getting to the fun part now, which is where we get to actually enter what we're going to put into our Mad Libs. So you can see here that the first step that I've put is for the Mad Libs main form. We're going to enter our answers. So let's have a look at what you've all submitted. I hope that people have made some fun choices. Let's have a look. I think it'll be, oh, nice. Look at all these choices. Okay, great. I see Anna. Very nice. Thank you. All right, let me put this, I'll see if I can organize this a bit on the fly. Let's move this over here so we can see both at the same time. Okay, nice. So let's find an animal first. I see squirrel. Okay, yeah, has to be the squirrel. Fair enough. An action. Oh, the aardvark was also very good though. Anyway, I'll let it go. We've chosen squirrel. Let it go, McDougall. Action. Let's see. I'm trying to find an action here. Sniffling. I see sniffling. Let's go with that. An object. I see a laptop is quite high up there, so let's go with laptop. Food, baked potato, sandwich. I mean, you can't go wrong with a sandwich, really, can you? Let's go with sandwich. Name, Snoofy Pants. Okay, I'm sorry, Snoofy Pants definitely wins. I don't know who that was, but good choice, Snoofy Pants. A drink. I see. Oh, Glühwein. Good choice, but maybe a bit too German, maybe. Let's go with ginger ale. I love a good ginger ale. Okay. Number 42. Okay, classic. Okay, I'll give in to the nerddom. Adjective. Let's see. If I see forlorn, I see evil. Let's go with evil. That's a nice one. Oh, then maybe that's a mood. No. Oh, now I'm confused. Adjective. Let's try something else then. Adjective. Tired, annoyed. These all kind of also tremendous. There we go. Tremendous is definitely an adjective and not a mood, I suppose. Anyway, and Berlin is clearly the winner for city. I won't resist. And mood will go with evil because we already chose it. There we go. Okay. So now we've got all of our answers. Thank you everyone for your contributions. I hope this makes for a good story. So now we can kind of go a little bit faster. Visit, again, we can do sci.visit. That's the one. Localhost 3000. So a little bit of repetition here. Now, this is kind of cool. What I did actually for this application in order to make this work is I exported a little login function. You don't need to understand everything that's going on here if this is relatively new to you. All it takes is a username and a password, and then it sets our login state so that we can continue on with our application. So here we're going to use sci.wrap, and then we're going to log in with our, I hope this is, I actually haven't done this one in a while, so let's try it. Let's hope this still works. Like that. So maybe we should just check that one quickly before we keep going. Okay, yes. So it looks like that did not work. Great. Wonderful. Lucky for me, I created a cheat, which is this thing that tells me what to actually type. Ah, it has to be in an object. That's my mistake. Okay, there we go. There we are. That's nice. Oh my God. Yes. It's still not happy with me. Ah, of course, because I need that. I think. Let's test it again. This is how testing can work. You go back and forth, you see what fails. Okay, that looks better. Okay, now we're good. So that's how you can kind of do this wrap thing. This wrap is basically just saying, take this function and execute it. There are other cool things you can do with wrap, but not for today. Another day. Okay, now I've also cheated this bit because this takes ages and is really boring for everyone to watch. At the JavaScript Congress, I manually typed this out and I can't even remember what I said. I think I just talked shit for like a long time. So let's just uncomment, excuse me, let's just uncomment that out and we can see here what's going on. I'm taking each input with its ID and then I'm putting in the answer from our answers object. That's all it is. It's exactly the same as before, sci.get, and then typing, and then putting in the constant that we asserted, that we defined before. Okay, and then one of the things that we're testing here is that the button is activated when all the form fields are filled out. Okay, so you can actually see what I mean here. Oh, yep, there it goes. Whoa! Did we just watch tests go brrrr, or did we just watch tests go brrrr? I think we did. But you can see here now that this is activated, but if not all of them are filled in, then it's disabled. So this is thanks to BS. So this is kind of part of how we do this. So if you missed that one, I'm just going to do it one more time for you because it's really cool. But what? Oh my God. Thanks to BS. I know, it's so cool. There's definitely a brrrr moment, yeah. So we want to check that our button is enabled at the end of this. So again, we're just going to get our, not a button, a button. And we're going to should, and what do you think it will be? Be enabled. Again, just very nice, straightforward. This is one of the reasons I love using Cypress. It just feels very natural. You can kind of guess, even a lot of the time, what it's going to be, and you're usually right. So that's one of our tests. And then we want to check the next thing, the next step. Normally, as I said, we like to reset tests to kind of 0. In this case, we are kind of relying on a previous test, but this is more the structure of testing an entire flow. So here we're going to check that the story is complete without data. Again, I have cheated this one by typing it out manually in advance. We're going to actually click the button that we mentioned earlier. Of course, you could save this as well and then recall it, but let's keep it simple. Oh, no, what am I doing? Again, click. Oh, I know how to spell click. I'm a developer. And the div with class results should contain the, yes, correct. So again, we can kind of go div, and as with CSS selectors, the hash means ID, the dot means class. So we're going to do a dot results should, and then we can do contain text, and it'll be final story. So again, the arranging here is setting up what the final story will be. The act is the clicking of the button. What does the user actually do? And then the results will give us our final story. So now, by the way, one more thing I should mention here. I know that it's come up with these red underlines. I don't know why IntelliJ does this. Just ignore it. You don't have to import anything. It's lying to you. So let's go back to here. Here we go. And we can read our final story. Once upon a time in Berlin, Snoofy Pants got out of bed to start their day. To their surprise, sitting at the end of their bed was an enormous squirrel sniffling the laptop. Snoofy Pants felt so evil, they knocked over the glass of ginger ale on their bedside table. Suddenly, the squirrel spoke. You must answer 42 tremendous questions, or I will steal your soul and your sandwich. And then we have the amazing story of Snoofy Pants in Berlin. So, and now we've also watched tests go brrrr. So we can just show it one more time. The login fills in all the fields, button is activated, it's clicked, and at any point in time, we can go back and see what the state was with our amazing time travel like that. Awesome. And that's just a small demo of what Cypress can do. So let me get back to my presentation. Here we go. And we can cover what we've learned. So we looked a little bit theory, What is end-to-end testing? When is it used? What are some pros and cons of using it? What is the arrange, act, assert structure that you can use to create a test? And then we got a chance to practice it. We did the installation and folder structure. Admittedly, I didn't practice that in front of you, but as I said, just open the terminal inside your project folder and you're good. Using describe before each and it to set up our tests. And then we got some Cypress commands. We used visit, we used wrap, we used get, we used type, click, and within. And then we looked at a few of the chainers that we can use, including be enabled, be visible, contain text, and have length. So hopefully that has given you a nice little introduction into what Cypress is, what it can do, and how you can use it. That's me. So let's chat, add me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I will very, very happily talk to just about anyone about almost anything. So feel free. Thank you.